Hey, what's up, guys? Hello for Football Talk here. Football is back, baby. We've had an awesome first week of NFL action, and these last few days I've watched every game from start to finish, and now I kind of wanted to recap all 60 matchups. You can check out my page, hellosforfootballtalk.com, where I made 3 statements for every single game. And here on YouTube, I wanted to give more of a general breakdown, just give you some of my thoughts on all these games, and I will also bring up some of the points I made in the article. But here's what I took away from week 1. I'll work my way through these games chronologically, kinda, and we're starting things out with Thursday night, the season opener, with the Houston Texans traveling to Kansas City to take on the Super Bowl champs. And you see the final score, 34-20. It actually wasn't that close. I think the Chiefs dominated this game on offense and defense. To me, Kansas City is on a different level than the Texans right now. I personally projected Houston to go 7-9, and I wasn't overly surprised that this game was never actually that close. But beyond the first quarter, this never really was a contest. The Chiefs scored 31 unanswered, and over that stretch, the Texans picked up only 8 first downs themselves. What really impressed me was the defense, because even with the 2 starting corners missing half the game basically, they pretty much shut down Deshaun Watson and company. And if Demarcus Robinson just held on to a couple of passes in the end zone, Casey would have scored 11 points on top of what they already had. As far as the Chiefs' offense goes, what really stood out, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had an unbelievable showing, actually put up the most rushing yards of any player in week 1 with 138. No other player cracked the 100 mark, while he had over 100 yards after contact alone. I said so in my mock draft when I projected CEH to go there. I said it when they drafted him. This guy's making this offense even more scary. Because as I've mentioned before, when you have all those speedsters streaking downfield and this guy is underneath, and you have to keep 2 safeties high and he's running against the light box, or he's just catching a check down and running through somebody's face, nobody wants to tackle that guy. Thank God I have him in all my fantasy leagues. And then the one thing about the Texans that really stood out to me, Will Fuller looks like the clear number 1 option in the pass game. He got 8 of 10 targets on the night for 112 yards, being on the field for 86% of the snaps, with David Johnson being the only other Texans player to catch more than 2 passes. There's a clear connection between Watson and Fuller, and I'm expecting Houston to be down quite a bit this season, so this could lead to a lot of production. But yeah, the Chiefs were sharp, and I expect them to be going forward as well. Let's move on to the Sunday slate, with the noon games here. First one being the Eagles traveling to Washington. I think Philly was a touchdown favorite, and what was funny about this, it was almost a mirror image of what happened week 1 last year, when Washington got out to a 17-0 lead, but Carson Wentz and Deshaun Jackson connected for a couple of deep balls, let them back in the game, and they actually won it. This time around, Philly dominated early on, and it wasn't really close at all. It should have been more than 17 points. Washington getting on the scoreboard finally with less than a minute remaining in the first half. And after that, I think 2 things really happened. First, the Eagles went down like birds, as you might say, and the Washington D-line, they completely took over the game. That might have been the biggest thing. Chase Young, he's obviously a favorite and my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year. We saw him dominate right away. But there were multiple guys from Washington that came through routinely, and they banged Carson Wentz around like a human piñata. Washington's not that good on the back end defensively, but with that pass rush, those DBs can start jumping routes, and you actually saw them do it more and more as the game progressed. Obviously, it didn't help that Philly lost all of the offensive linemen again, after they already had some losses up front. But the football team racking up 8 sacks and just being all over Wentz, it was highly impressive. And in Philadelphia, all of those injuries once again. Had to bring in 3 different offensive linemen off the bench after they had already lost Brandon Brooks and Andre Dillard before the season even started. Boston Scott had to go into the locker room after they had already made the trip without Miles Sanders. Let's hope that doesn't become a common theme once again. But then the other thing that really stood out to me with Doug Peterson in the second half, they could have won that game if they would have just played conservatively, run the ball, keep the pass rush honest. But they just went to a full-on shotgun approach with Carson Wentz being back there every single play, passing the ball. And that's when that D-line could really tee off. There was no threat of the run game. They didn't go on the center anymore. And it became a huge issue for them. So as I mentioned already on my Instagram account, I thought I'd never say this, but the football team is alone in first place here. And that takes us to our next game here with the Miami Dolphins traveling to the New England Patriots. First look at the Cam Newton-led offense. And I gotta tell you, they could be scary. Because it's not quite like it was with Tom. Obviously, Cam, he's really good at spreading the field, finding those matchups and attacking them. But Josh McDaniels actually built a run game around Cam, and let him be a huge factor in that. Led the team with 15 carries. Overall, they ran the ball 42 times compared to only 19 passes. With all those jet sweep fakes, inverted V runs, different option plays, that just forces the opposition to be very disciplined and assignment proof. Plus, then Cam with his big arm testing the defense off play action. That can be a scary thing. With that being said, one of my statements that I made in the article, I don't want any New England skill position players on my fantasy team because it's just a headache every single week. Other than Cam Newton, if he's for some reason still out there and available, I would not be comfortable with any of the other guys because overall they had 6 different guys touch the ball at least 5 times. Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead, Julian Edelman, JJ Taylor, and N'Keal Harry. I'm not really interested in that. And once again with the final score, another thing that you have to take into account, N'Keal Harry fumbling into the end zone, less than a yard away from scoring. Didn't have to be as close as it actually was in the end. For Miami, I didn't think they were bad defensively, and I expect them to have a pretty good season on that side of the ball. But to be the first ones to go up against this type of offense, they didn't really know how to game plan for it, and that was definitely a disadvantage. But when I look on the offensive side of the ball, Devonta Parker I think is already banged up again. Preston Williams, he did make some big plays downfield, but overall the Patriots defense, despite all their losses, played a pretty good game, and I'm not sure how much longer we have to wait for Tua here. Because everybody, including the current starter Ryan Fitzpatrick, knows that it's only a question of time until the rookie finally gets in there and takes over at the quarterback position. And Fitzy played really well actually in 2019, I thought. But in this year's season opener, he was picked off 3 times. And if you just follow the CBS cameras, you'd think that Tua was already about to go onto the field. Next day, the Dolphins host another division rival in the Bills. And then it's the Jaguars on Thursday Night Football, so a short week before they have to face the Seahawks at home. And then have 2 tough road trips with San Francisco and Denver. So maybe they still wait for that time to give him a rather soft start, because then the 2 LA teams have to travel to Miami, and that's when the 2 area can finally kick off. But I think we will definitely see him around mid-season for the first time, and I think he'll play quite a bit this season as long as he's healthy. So definitely a strong showing by the Patriots. I think the Dolphins are better than what they showed on Sunday, and I'm curious to see when Tua will be out there and what we can still expect from his team going forward. And with that, we get to our next divisional game with the Green Bay Packers going to Minnesota. And Aaron Rodgers was just straight up dealing out there. I love to see him throw those 4 touchdowns and basically shut everybody else up. After people had started questioning how good is he really still, Packers drafting Jordan Love in the first round. Are they ready to move on from Rodgers? The way he threw the ball and the move, the zip he put on his passes, and just the way he was picking apart that secondary from Minnesota, it took me back to when Rodgers was the best football player on the planet for about 6 years or so. The most impressive part was that stretch in like about half a minute where he scored 2 touchdowns. First on the move, scrambling to his right, just throws an absolute perfect ball to Davante Adams in the end zone, where the corner just didn't have a chance to make a play on the ball because of where the ball was put. And then after Gio Alexander interception from the Minnesota 45, throws a perfect deep ball along the sideline to Marcus Valdes-Scantling, from the opposite hash, perfectly in stride. And he could have had an even better day if MVS didn't drop that 3rd and 6 play once in the second half. Also loved what I saw from the Packers offense with some jet sweeps and an end-around game. The game was pretty close until Rodgers threw those 2 touchdowns, but I thought he was surgical pretty much the entire game. And that also brings me to the Minnesota back end, which I thought before the season already, and now it shows me even more. It could be a pretty big concern for them. Heading into the year, I talked about how all their cornerbacks combined for less than 1,500 snaps on defense, and that lack of experience it showed right away against an elite quarterback like Rodgers. They had no answer for number 12, averaging over 10 yards per attempt, and if not for a couple of drops and guys just tripping up, that number could have been even higher. You saw Rodgers pick on Holton Hill quite a bit. He taught the rookies a lesson, and nobody could slow down Davante Adams, who hauled in 14 of 17 targets for 156 yards and 2 TDs. And for Davante Adams, I don't know how you can say he's not a top 5 receiver. When I released my personal top 100 rankings, I had him behind only Julio Jones and Michael Thomas as that 3rd receiver in the league already. Might have been a little high compared to most people out there. And we also saw DeAndre Hopkins had a huge week, obviously, in his debut with Arizona. We didn't have big weeks, but Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., all those guys belong in that conversation. But when you look at Davante Adams, especially in the first game against an inexperienced secondary, he took those guys to school. The way he got off the line, plays he made after the catch. Even though Metalfoot, he did manufacture a few touches for him, like on bubble screens, on a deep crosser, but he always made the most of those plays, had some big catches down the field, and just for good measure, he also recovered the game-sealing onside kick. His connection with Rodgers, it's on a different level. And I have to say, even though there was a lot of talk about them not selecting a receiver in a historically great positional draft, I thought MVS and El Nazard, they really stepped up in the season opener. And if they can keep that going, this passing offense could be tough to slow down. At this point, I want to add Adams' counterpart on Minnesota's side of the ball with Adam Thielen. He had a great day himself, obviously. Dalvin Cook had a pretty good game, but just not very inspiring, that Minnesota offense. Points are definitely there at the end now, but a lot of that came when the Packers were already up big. And that brings us to a first big surprise of the weekend, I thought, with the Colts losing to the Jaguars. And just let me start like this. The Colts should not have lost this game. The Colts were in position to win it, let up so many chances, were stopped on a fourth down within the opponent's 5-yard line, a bad interception for Phillip Rivers in the fourth quarter, on a deep cross at Paris Campbell, when he really telegraphed that throw and allowed the safety who was in quarters coverage to break in front of his receiver and pick it off. Special teams miscues, just not very good situational football. They might have overlooked this team a little bit, but let's give some credit to the Jaguars here. Unlike what new Buccaneers running back Leonard Fournette may think, Gardner Minshew is a real quarterback. I mean, you can't be too mad at Fournette, since he had to deal with Blake Bortles for most of his career in Jacksonville, but after week 1, you can definitely say that statement did not age well, because against the Colts, who were favored by 8 points, Minshew really came out to play, completed 19 of 20 pass attempts for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns, really showed that gamer mentality, came out as a leader, made plays off script, and I've already talked about this Jacksonville receivers earlier this offseason. I think they're an underrated group, and I also believe that the Jaguars found their new lead back with James Robinson, who was a big draft crush of mine coming out of Illinois State when undrafted, but I really think had a lot of talent, especially at the East-West Shrine game. He really showed out against the top competition. He took every single carry on Sunday, and I expect him to take the majority of the load again. And with that, let's get to the guy for the Colts that I believe will be the workhorse going forwards. And before I get to anything else, it sucks that Marlon Mack seems to have torn his Achilles. He was off to a strong start in that game, and I feel really sick for him, especially being in a contract year. But with that being said, I also am really pumped to see Jonathan Taylor go off behind that Colts offensive line. Taylor actually didn't run the ball especially well, 9 carries for only 22 yards, but surprisingly he was a big factor in the pass game, which wasn't really a strong suit for him at Wisconsin. Caught all of his 6 targets for 67 yards, really showed that sprinter speed and the ability to build up power on a couple of plays there. Nyheim Hines got 15 touches in the game, and he'll clearly be a factor going forward for this offense with his ability in the pass game and as a gadget player. But without Mack, Taylor now has all the chances to rival Clyde Edwards-Helaire for Offensive Rookie of the Year and be one of the top players in terms of rushing yards going forward. And that brings me to another rookie who really showed out on Sunday, I thought, CJ Henderson, the 9th overall pick, coming out of Florida for Jacksonville. He was outstanding in his first showing, broke up 3 passes, and came up with a big interception on kind of a jump ball when Jacksonville was down 7-0 in the second quarter, set up his offense inside the opposing 30-yard line, and that led to the first touchdown to DJ Chark. Henderson, I thought, was all over T.Y. Hilton on a couple of snaps, including one throw to the end zone, which I thought should have actually been called for PI, but doesn't matter. And he also knocked the ball out of the hands of Hilton on that 4th down to seal the win. So big game for Henderson, and people were critical about him, about his tackling, all this kind of stuff. I thought he had a really good showing, and I expect him to be a stud corner down the line. A lot of divisional matchups in this week 1, and we get to a second matchup in the NFC North with the Bears traveling to Detroit, and I'm sorry, same old Lions. I'm really starting to feel bad for these guys from Detroit. It's been about 30 years since he last won a playoff game, and they've been kind of irrelevant for most of the time. But in my preseason predictions, I had them going 8-8. I think they have a lot of pieces to make them a good team. Still unsure about the head coach Matt Patricia and what will happen there going forward. But I think there's a lot of pieces there. I'm a big fan of Matthew Stafford, Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, a very good receiver duo. I like what they're building on defense if Patricia can put it all together. And they were in control of this game. They had no business of losing. They were up 23-6 with the Bears having a 4th and 1 from the opposing 10-yard line as we were heading into the 4th quarter. And from that point on, Mitch Trubisky all of a sudden turned into Joe Montana or something, scored a touchdown on 3 of the final 4 drives in just 15 plays. And through 3 quarters, he was really not good. Had completed only 12 of 26 passes for 153 yards. Recently had missed a wide open Cole Kmet on a 3rd and 9 from Detroit 10 by several yards. And he was definitely helped by some line miscues. But he delivered in the clutch and threw those 3 touchdowns. The final one in particular, that slot fade to Anthony Miller, that was a thing of beauty. Miller had made some huge grabs early already in the 4th quarter. And while I say this was still more bad Lions than good Bears, let's give this guy some credit. As far as Detroit goes, I thought they ran the ball really well. Adrian Peterson, I have no idea how he still gets it done, but to me was the best running back on the field on Sunday. Marvin Jones had a pretty good day, had that huge truck on the rookie Jalen Johnson. But in the 4th quarter, Matthew Stafford took a bad sack, which led to a missed field goal from 55 yards out. Then later tried to force a ball over the middle, got knocked up and intercepted when Detroit was actually still up by 3. And that gave the Bears the chance to go up by 4. But even with that, the Lions still had a chance to win the game. Stafford drives them all the way down to the Chicago 16, and after spiking the ball with 11 seconds left, the Lions quarterback hits running back DeAndre Swift on a perfect pass on a wheel route, but the usually sure-handed rookie had it slip right out of his hands. After that, they just throw up a prayer into the end zone and get knocked down. But that's just another heartbreaker for the Lions fans, and I'm not sure how many more they can take. But one more thing I want to talk about with Chicago, I thought the offensive line was a lot better than I expected them to be, especially in the run game, because after the main part of free agency and the draft had wrapped up, I thought Chicago had 2 major holes on the roster, a safety to pair up with Eddie Jackson, and that right guard position. As bad as Trubisky was in 2019, I thought the biggest issue with Matt Nagy's offense was the lack of a run game. Finished bottom 6 in total rushing yards and yards per attempt, and then when he basically replaced Kyle Long with a former first-round bust in Germain Ifedi from Seattle, I was obviously worried, even though I said right away that I think he would fit better inside. But for the first show of 2020, I thought the Bears really started getting people moving in the run game. You actually saw linemen get 5 to 10 yards down the field, putting hands on linebackers. David Montgomery, he ran really hard. Tariq Cohen, he got loose a couple times on like a power play and a draw. And even Cordero Patterson had a couple of crucial carries, like the conversion on 4th and inches. Overall, they ran the ball 28 times for 149 yards. And I want to give a lot of credit to the new O-line coach, Juan Castillo, who had to replace the legendary coach in Harry Highstand. If this is what they're going to be going forward, and Mitch can some play what he was like in the 4th quarter, I think Chicago can be a good team. And for Detroit, I hope they can recover from this, because I still believe they have the ingredients to have a pretty good season. But let's see what both of these teams show us in week 2. And that brings us to a first interconference game, with the Raiders going to Carolina, taking on that new coaching staff and Matt Rule and those guys. I thought this would be an offense-heavy game, and it definitely delivered. For Derek Carr, his usual efficient showing, completing 73% of his passes for 239 yards and a touchdown. But what I really liked, I thought he was willing to test the defense deep with all those vertical weapons that they've brought in now. I know John Gruden offense is about frustrating defenses with those short completions in the run game before hitting them over the top with some shots. But that last element really was missing last season, and I thought that really capped the Raiders' potential. But as conservative as DC usually is, which can be oftentimes to a frustrating extent, with the additions they have made this offseason with Henry Ruggs and all those guys, I think he might be able to cut it loose a little more. And we saw it on the second play of the game only, Carr putting the ball 50 yards in the air for a rookie speedster. Later on in that first quarter, he hits Ruggs on a deep crosser to set up a touchdown from Josh Jacobs from the 1-yard line, threw a 23-yard dime to Aguilar shortly before halftime to put his team up by 5. And I thought just his eyes were downfield a little more than they usually are. As far as the Carolina offense goes, I really liked what I saw from Joe Brady and Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, Brady has worked under Sean Payton in a much smaller role, but he's still a rookie offensive coordinator, and to start off your career by putting up 30 points, that's pretty sweet. Bridgewater definitely deserves some credit here, but I really liked what I saw from the offense in terms of spreading the field, 5 guys out on the route, we already know that from his times at LSU, forcing the Las Vegas defense to defend every level of the field, a lot of completions, but just simple reads on the second level defender, so man indicators, all that kind of stuff, really making things easy for his quarterback. Don't know who actually made that 4th down call that ended the game when they handed it to the fullback, But obviously you want to see the ball in the hands of your best player in Christian McCaffrey, or create some separation, some kind of rub on it, like a mesh concept. That would have definitely been a call that I like better. But the true star from this game, Josh Jacobs, and I think he'll be a superstar in the league sooner rather than later. Came into the season with very high expectations for him already, and he put up a show against Carolina. To me, the Raiders have a top 5 O-line, and I expect Jacobs to be right up there with the leading rushers in the league. Last year already put up a rookie team record with 1,150 rushing yards, forced an NFL-leading 69 missed tackles, all that despite missing 3 games. And the real difference coming into this season, I think, is his involvement in the pass game. He was pretty good at it already in college, but last year as a rookie, caught only 20 passes for 166 yards. This year's season opener, already bringing in 4 passes, 46 yards, showed what he can do just on simple dump-offs, of the way he goes down the field, takes his head down, runs through defenders, to go with those 93 yards he had on the ground and 3 touchdowns. I think this team will go as far as Jacobs goes, and if Derek Carr can become a little more aggressive, produce those big plays, I think this Raiders team is actually pretty interesting. But for Matt Rule to only lose by 4 in his first game, I think that showed some promise, even though the defense obviously still has plenty of holes. We go back to more divisional action with the Jets going to Buffalo, and that score, 27-17, it does not indicate what the game looked like. I thought the Bills were in control the entire way, could have easily blown them out by like 30 points. It took the Jets 40 minutes to finally get into the end zone, and that was only with Jamison Crowder breaking like 3 tackles and going 69 yards on a quick screenplay to get there. The Bills' rookie kicker Tyler Bass, he missed a couple of field goals from within 40 yards. Even though when I look at it, the first one still looks good to me. Josh Allen fumbled the ball twice, and that last touchdown the Jets got, it was pretty meaningless with less than a minute remaining. For the Bills, I think the one area that they really needed to improve upon was the receiver position, because even though John Brown probably had his best season as a pro in 2019, and Cole Beasley was a dependable target in the slot, none of those guys are true number 1 options. Insert Stephon Diggs from Minnesota, who they brought in via trade. He certainly opens up the offense, puts everybody else on the receiving core in the right position. Dawson Knox, I think, starting to take another step here. They even drew up a screen pass to him early in the game. Josh Allen got his backs involved. And so I really like what offensive coordinator Brian Daboll can now do in terms of making opponents defend the entire field. I know it was only the Jets, but they just seem to play so much more freely in the pass game. And Josh Allen, to me, I said it before the season, he was one of my honorable mentions in the MVP discussion. I was actually made fun of a little on the Reddit forum. But what I just said about the pass catches that they have in Buffalo, it could be a big year for this team and the quarterback in particular. I thought the offensive line gave Allen a lot of time to scan the field. He seemed a little more patient, found his checkdowns, but also threw some absolute lasers, which he's definitely capable of. Allen made some big plays with his legs, whether it was on designed run plays, which there were quite a few of, even on a 4th down, him converting, or him going on scrambles. Will you get those occasional what the hell moments from him still? Sure, like fumbling the ball while he was flipping over the defender, but if he can just be reined in a little with that and be a little more of a consistent threat from within the pocket to go with those off-script plays, I think he could put up some big numbers. And the thing I have to say with the Jets, I don't know how much longer Adam Gase is going to be there. I feel bad for Sam Darnold because I was really high on him coming out of USC. Actually was my top quarterback back in 2018. I think if he's in the right situation, he's already an above average starter. But in my power rankings a couple of weeks ago, I had the Jets all the way at the bottom of the list, and they haven't really shown me anything to make me believe that's not where they belong. And if they do somehow end up with that first overall pick, I don't really know how you can pass on Trevor Lawrence in that situation. And that takes us to another division rival, banging on the little brother. The Baltimore Ravens beating up on the Cleveland Browns, 38-6. The game was never really in questions beyond the first quarter at least. And before we get to anything else, the reigning MVP Lamar Jackson, he could be even better in 2020. In terms of his pure passing, he was so sharp and in control of the offense, kept his eyes downfield constantly, even when he was moving up in the pocket, bailing out of it, moving side to side. He was looking to make plays with his arm rather than his legs. We saw him hit that deep ball to Marquise Brown, which is something that I really wanted to see him improve upon. And he really impressed me with his ball placement all afternoon. Took advantage of the leverage that the defenders had, drilled the ball into some tight windows. And the day after the game, the statistic that I saw that was really telling me a lot, of those passes of 10 plus yards, he was 9 of 10 for 180 yards. after he had only completed 49.2% of those in his MVP season. I would like to see him avoid some of those big hits where he goes head first to pick up a few extra yards, which I just don't think are worth it. But overall, just such an impressive performance as a passer. And on the other end, for the Browns, their pass catchers could not get free all afternoon. That secondary really staying on top of it. It's not a secret that the Ravens have one of the best secondaries in the NFL, especially that premier group of corners. But I would argue that they are the very best in terms of the pure corners. Yeah, Travis Landry got open a couple of crossers. There were a couple of deeper developing routes when Baker actually did have a clean pocket. But altogether, outside of that one Cleveland touchdown at the goal line, where the Ravens defense just lost one of the tight ends in that jumbo package, OBJ and company could not get free. Marlon Humphrey, to me, already the top 5 corner. Marcus Peters, once again, we saw it, unreal at anticipating and reading routes. Jimmy Smith would still be a high-quality number 2 on any other team. And Tavon Young, him coming back into the slot, that just upgrades this unit even more. I thought Austin Hooper being a big addition at the tight end position, especially being the highest paid early this offseason. For him to only catch 2 passes for 15 yards, that was pretty disappointing. But one more thing for the Ravens, they were dominant despite not really getting the run game going. And as it gets to this backfield, J.K. Dobbins, to me, he's about to take it over. No, the rookie won't play 80% of the snaps or handle the majority of the rushing load. That's just not the type of offense that they are. But there's a big reason that I grabbed Dobbins in all of my fantasy leagues. He was my number 2 back in the draft. And I said right away that it was a perfect fit for this Baltimore offense. In his debut, had a couple of nice gains, converted twice in the goal line, while veteran Mark Ingram, he was stuffed for minimal yardage on several occasions, and the rookie just looked a little more dynamic. For the Seahawks and the Falcons, there's 2 big things here. First of all, the Falcons secondary is still a mess. And second of all, Russell Wilson, he was finally allowed to cook. Something that fans have screamed at the top of the lungs for some time, either from Seattle or just NFL fans in general. The Falcons were really bad on defense over the first half of 2019, allowing almost 32 points per game and going 1-7 over that stretch. They started turning it around over the second half, but they reverted back to the early form from 2019 on Sunday. He saw them play a lot more man coverage, get into the face of receivers, but there was a lot of separations out of the breaks or just losing receivers and crossing routes. And when they were in zone, those guys just gave too much of a cushion, allowing easy completions of 10 to 15 yards on second or third and long, which gave Seattle a much better chance to convert a third down or hit easy field goals. What really killed them was that 4th and 5 play from the Atlanta 38-yard line, when it was still 14-12 actually for Seattle, with Isaiah Oliver missing his punch in the press alignment and giving up the inside release to DK Metcalf, who still found a way to get that perfect over-the-shoulder catch on a fade route. And even as bad as Atlanta was on the back end, what a performance this really was from Russ. I don't know many defenses would have been able to slow him down. Went 31 of 35 for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. Picked up another couple of first downs with his legs. And like I said, it wasn't like the Falcons were all over the Seattle receivers. But the touch that Wilson can throw the ball with to perfectly put it right in the hands of his receivers, it's a beautiful thing to watch. DK Metcalf, I think he's taking another step heading into year 2, especially in his route running. Tyler Lockett, when he's back fully healthy, that connection he has with Russ. If that is what we're going to see going forward, it's bombs away for Seattle, which means trouble for the rest of the league, because they still have that power run game and can take those play action shots off it. 2 players out of that game that really stood out to me. First, Calvin Ridley, absolute stud receiver. I've always believed in this kid. He was my number 1 receiver in the draft 3 years ago. Coming out of Alabama, immediately started producing. Was on track for 1,000 yards last year, but then got hurt. And in his first game of 2020, caught 9 passes for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Constantly creating separations by tackling leverage, excellent route running. Not necessarily a straight up burner, but he just knows how to find space. Very shifty after the catch. Had that one bad drop late in the game on 4th down, which he just focused too much on getting his feet in bounds. That sucked. But with him and Julio Jones, those guys are right there in the race for the top receiver duo in the league. In a loaded division for pass catchers, actually. And for Seattle, Jamal Adams immediately made his presence felt. I thought Seattle changed things up a little, giving some different looks on the back end. Adams being heavily involved as a blitzer and got home a couple of times. Finished one with a sack, actually. But yeah, very disappointing showing for Atlanta defensively. And for Seattle, if they really let Russ go to work here, they could be much more dangerous than the usual methodical style of play. And with that, we switch to the second window on Sunday, the 4 p.m. games, with the Chargers going to Cincinnati. And I just have to say, welcome to Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. it's always tough for a first overall pick who was on a good team and was a good player in college to get to a bad team, try and turn things around, and then learn very early on that even if it does everything right, it might not lead to victories. And Burrow did not play a perfect game by any means. Got picked off by Melvin Ingram in the fourth quarter, who made a really great instinctive play when he just spun off a blocker as he realized there was a screen pass and had the ball land right in his hands as Burrow tried to shovel it ahead late. He also missed a potential touchdown to AJ Green on a deep ball earlier, and with 13 points, that just doesn't get it done in the NFL usually. But with that being said, he had his team right in position to beat the Chargers, drove them all the way down to the LA 3, only to have AJ Green called for an offensive pass interference on what would have otherwise been the game-winning touchdown, and then his kicker missing a chip shot 33-yard field goal attempt. And for Randy Bullock, I feel bad if he actually got hurt, but then again, he better be hurt because that was not pretty. And there's one play in the Bengals that I want to address here. Right tackle Bobby Hart. And I've said it many times that he's one of the worst starting tackles in the game, and I have no idea why the Bengals continue to pay him. But let me just give you one advice. Do not talk trash, especially not when you go up against Joey Bosa, because that guy was angry, and he came back a few plays later, got a sack on Burrow when he did his usual two-hand swipe, and then got into the face of Hart. I think he's learned his lesson, and the Chargers D-line, they were beating the crap out of Cincy's front five, and the only reason that they actually were in the game was Burrow, speeding up his eternal clock and still finding ways to make plays. But you do not talk trash when the players that you're going up against are clearly superior and are beating your ass. The Chargers offense, not very inspiring. Keenan Allen, he got free quite a bit on third down, made some big catches. And Mike Williams, he's just one of the great big play receivers in the game. Incredible on 50-50 balls, routinely comes through with those big catches downfield along the sideline. And whenever his team needs him most, they usually just throw the ball up to him and he somehow finds a way to come down with it. Last season finally cracked the 1,000-yard mark, led the league with 20.4 yards per grab, and this past Sunday might have only come up with 4 catches, but all of them were key in the victory. A great toe-tap grab on the sideline. He came back to the ball on a deeper curl route later on, and then had those 2 go balls on the sideline, where the safety almost knocked his head off on both of them. Austin Eckler, he could not really get going, and I think that Bengals front has improved quite a bit. I don't know what's going on with DJ Reader. I think he was a big addition. Hopefully he's healthy and helps them win some games going forward. But overall, Burrow showed some promising signs. The Chargers, to me, are kind of capped with that kind of offense, but deservedly won the game, even though at the end, obviously the Bengals had the chance to win or at least tie things up. 2 very interesting teams in the NFC West. The Arizona Cardinals going to San Francisco, finding a way to get the upset. I was very impressed with Arizona, and I don't feel like people are talking about it enough. Kyler Murray, not the cleanest of games, but without those 2 kneel downs out of the pistol set, he would have been the only 100-yard rusher on Sunday after Clyde Edwards-Helaire already did it on Thursday night. Almost forced that connection with DeAndre Hopkins, who I do understand to some degree that the Texans didn't have the kind of money to pay D-Hop, but Bill O'Brien still doesn't deserve any sympathy for being a laughingstock for NFL fans. Because Hopkins, he's an elite receiver, and Houston clearly didn't get back enough in return for what he was worth, basically with a second-round pick and taking on a bad David Johnson contract, who, to be fair, had a pretty solid performance in his first game with Houston. But D-Hop's 14 catches were more than all the Texans receivers combined on Thursday, who had 13 of them. Nuke went for 151 yards, including a couple of big grabs, including setting up a 1-yard Kenyon Drake touchdown after being called just short of the goal line. And another piece in this offense, Chase Edmonds, he could be a real factor. They seem to really like him spread out wide and making plays in the passing game, but also getting a few touches out of the backfield. I even like the third back in this offense, and Eno Benjamin, who they took in the 7th round out of Arizona State. Maybe he gets on the field sooner rather than later, because seemingly everybody in this offense can eat, and it wasn't just Hopkins, but he definitely had a statement game in his first performance with his new team. And as far as the Cardinals defense goes, I think they're starting to come together. Didn't look great from the start when they allowed that 76-yard catch and run touchdown on an angle route to Raheem Mostert. But outside of that one play, they held the offense of one of the game's most creative play calls in Kyle Shanahan to just 290 yards. Mostert averaged under 4 yards per carry on 15 attempts, and the reigning NFC champs just scored 1 field goal over 50 minutes of game time. I'd advise you to check out Brett Coleman's breakdown of all the different elements to this Vance Joseph defense on his YouTube channel, because to me it seems like they now have all the pieces to actually be successful with it. Budda Baker, he's a flying missile out there. The run defense should take a huge step forward without they brought him on the front. and some of the young guys made big plays for them down the stretch, including Byron Murphy breaking up the final fourth down attempt for San Francisco, although the ball clearly was thrown behind the receiver. And that brings me to Jimmy Garoppolo. If this team wants to repeat and go to the Super Bowl again, Jimmy G has to be more accurate and better overall. I certainly understand why 49ers fans are frustrated. It was the same for me coming out of the Super Bowl and with this game, because their team was in control of the game, and even after the Cardinals took the lead, their quarterback had all the chances to still get them the W. While it wasn't the most impressive performance on the ground, San Francisco still rushed for 123 yards on 4.9 yards per carry, and Garoppolo could also heavily rely on his backs in the pass game. But if you take away the long touchdown from Mostert, where the quarterback basically just had to lob it over the middle and watch number 31 take off, Jimmy G threw for only 183 yards on the other 32 attempts he had, which brings us to 5.7 yards per attempt. His stat line did look pretty good in the end, but it doesn't really represent the performance he had. Not only did he almost kill George Kittle on a simple bubble screen by putting the ball way too high, but when his team needed him most with the ball at the Arizona 21, he had two big misses. First, he underthrew an easy touchdown to Kendrick Bourne on the first down, who easily had Patrick Peterson beat, and then he threw the ball behind Trent Taylor on that 4th and 5 play. So plenty of chances to still win the game. I think San Francisco is the better team, but as Arizona is starting to come together, they could be a dangerous squad. And now let's talk about the game of the week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to New Orleans to face off against the Saints. Brady against Breeze, the much anticipated matchup. And the first thing that really stood out to me watching this game, the Saints defensive line has a clear advantage over the Bucs O-line. The formula for beating Tom Brady has been out there for a while. Get home with 4, put some pressure on him, play coverage, be very strategic if you do decide to blitz him, because we know he can beat the blitz like it's nothing. But on Sunday, Cameron Jordan and company, they made life very hard for Brady. The 43-year-old quarterback got sacked 3 times, and they forced him to move around constantly. You saw some frustration on the first pick that he threw. We expect Mike Evans to continue going down the seams, and I think I will actually agree on that because it was a split safety look, and I would expect him to carry that down the seams, but that's a different topic. Instead, Brady, he was also off with his ball placement on a few occasions, like on the pick 6 where he threw behind the receiver, a couple other plays there as well. But that advantage the Saints have with the D-line is why I had them beating the Bucs in the NFC title game when I put up my season predictions a couple of weeks ago. Gronk looked old to me in week 1. Mike Evans, he was not really a factor, clearly wasn't totally healthy, even though he had that late touchdown that was only grab of the game. But the guy that really stood out to me, little Scotty Miller. He made some big plays for Brady, was a 6th round pick out of Bowling Green last year. In this game, he caught 5 passes for 73 yards and added another 6-yard run, which put him second behind only Ronald Jones in terms of total scrimmage yards, and was only behind him by 3 yards as well. The guy they call Scooter, you saw him line up outside, on the inside, caught a couple of passes over the middle, came up with a big grab on a slot fade, and he also forced a PI call on an out and up with another receiver motioning into a stack and creating some man coverage because of it. I think Miller could be Brady's new version of what he had in Julian Edelman in his new home here. As far as the Saints offense goes, I've talked about this quite a bit. For Drew Brees, I think his arm is really starting to decline, and this game should be built around their backs in the run game, which creates kind of a tough match against the Buccaneers, because they were the number 1 rushing defense last season, and I expect them to be right up there in the ranks once again this year. No reason to think that they won't be. Overall, the Bucs defense I thought had a strong first showing, but the one guy for the Saints that I think is back to his usual self, Alvin Kamara, that guy's just a different breed. I wouldn't advocate paying too many running backs beyond their rookie contract, and at this point I think the Saints must have turned off salary cap or something on their Madden team with how much they already are in the minus heading into next year's offseason. But what we saw on Sunday was an elite running back, and he actually didn't get it quite done on the ground, only 12 attempts for 16 yards. Latavius Murray actually was the leading rusher for this team, but Kamara also caught 5 passes for 51 yards, and he converted twice in the red zone, once on a screen pass that already seemed dead in the backfield, and then on a 6-yard run where he just bounced off a tackler, saw the mouse be flying with one of the defenders, and he was just standing straight up, almost like in a movie. That explosiveness, the contact balance, and the speed, they're all back. He was banged up for most of the last season, and I think he will be the Saints' best play in 2020. And that brings us to Sunday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys going to Los Angeles, to new SoFi Stadium, and the Rams opened their new house in style, beating the Cowboys 20-17. Another pretty disappointing Cowboys loss, But I think what you saw from the Rams, from the offense in particular, Sean McVay, he's still an excellent play caller. I only had the Rams winning 6 or 7 games when I went through the schedule, but I always believed in their young head coach, and to me it was more about the roster and then some other factors around it that had me worried. But McVay's game plan on Sunday, it was a beauty, finding a great mixture between those zone runs, bootlegs, and throwback screens off those. It kept the Cowboys defense guessing all night long. Robert Woods, he was a major beneficiary of it, 6 catches for 105 yards. And I just loved how they utilized their backs with Cam Akers. Not the most efficient night, but you saw some of the talents that he had. And Malcolm Brown, he was really the star of the show. McVay created so many layups for his quarterback Jared Goff. And I thought he really tied everything together like the young genius that he was praised to be a couple of years ago only. And for the Rams, also the offensive line, one of my big concerns heading into the season, with the 2 tackles having shown some signs of regression last year and not really adding any pieces to it this offseason. But even Chris Collinsworth pointed out in the broadcast, those guys started creating some vertical push to go along with the horizontal nature of that zone run game, gave those backs some room to run, and especially with Brown, you saw that ability to break tackles, spinning off defenders, constantly falling forward for extra yardage. The rookie Akers also looked pretty good. And that's the type of attack that I want to see from the Rams, because it sets everything else up for them. As far as Dallas goes, 2 bad injuries. Leighton Vander Esch with the broken collarbone. Hopefully he's not out too long. While Blake Jarvin, the starting tight end, he's out for the season. That definitely sucks. I thought he could have a pretty big breakout season. The offense did not play up to par. Aaron Donald just had their way with its interior offensive line. Even Zach Martin got beat up quite a bit. But the one guy for Dallas that really stood out to me, Alden Smith, that guy's back. Because when somebody hasn't played a snap of football for 5 years, and he had to leave the NFL for drug problems, it's tough to believe that they will be back as the same type of players that they were before. Especially for a guy like Alden. He looked like a Hall of Famer early on in the stage for San Francisco. Now he's gone for 5 years. And on Sunday night he comes in and doesn't look like he's really lost a step. The Rams O-line, they did show some improvement, but they had no answer for the guy who now wears number 58. You saw Smith win on an up and under. He got through in a little TE twist. He showed the ability to collapse the pocket or slice through to hit the ball carrier in the backfield in the run game. If he keeps this thing going, he could be a serious contender for comeback play of the year. And with that, we move on to Monday night, where we had a doubleheader, and I'd like to keep this every single week. The Pittsburgh Steelers going to New York, taking on the Giants. To me, the Steelers, the best defense in all of football, and especially that front 7. On Monday night, they had a dominant showing, holding the most talented running back in all of football in Saquon Barkley to 6 total rushing yards. Daniel Jones, he was knocked around and put on the turf constantly, but Dupree in particular, he was a terror off the edge. Chased on a couple of run plays from the backside when he was unblocked, took advantage of the mismatches, but he actually dared to put a tight end on him. Both TJ Watt and Cam Hayward came up with a pick. Devin Bush, he was just flying around the field all game long. And those New York offensive linemen, they were getting pushed back constantly in the run game, forcing Saquon to redirect and leading to several tackles for loss. There was this one snap that was actually funny to me, with right tackle Cameron Fleming. He was caught in between his edge rusher and the inside backer coming up the B-gap, with neither one of them blocked. And instead of taking one of them, he actually ended up spinning around and looking completely lost. I'll put that on my Instagram later on, you can check it out. Really funny play actually. But with that being said, I thought Daniel Jones did not have a bad game. Saw a lot of improvement from him already. It might have not looked great on the stat sheet, but for Jones, I think he's already grown so much in his ability to feel pressure and operate from the pocket, while also keeping his incredible toughness when he gets knocked around and just gets up right away. Made some crucial throws on 3rd and 4th downs off play action, burned the defense a couple of times with his legs. I really like what he did, finding his checkdowns late instead of holding on to the ball and allowing the defense to swipe at it, which was a huge issue for him as a rookie. There was this awesome drive early in the second half where he led his team down to the Pittsburgh 4-yard line, methodically marching down the field against this Pittsburgh defense, only to have the ball knocked out of his hands by Bud Dupree and it ending up counting as an interception against Jones. Don't get this wrong, these Giants, they're still a rebuilding team, but I think they found their franchise signal caller. They just need to surround him with an offensive line now, and a defense that can actually stop somebody. For the names that they have out there, Big Blues defense wasn't terrible. For that Steeler offense, James Conner hurt again. I don't know if he's going to last much longer in Pittsburgh. He's in a contract year. And Benny Snell, he looked pretty good when he was finally out there. As far as the receivers go, Deontay Johnson, he started coming along after dropping a punt and having a pass slip through his hands early on, starting getting involved more. And Juju Smith-Schuster, after a very disappointing 2019 season, where he was fighting through some injuries, after he had just come off a spectacular season where he outproduced Antonio Brown, I still had him as a top 70 player in my yearly rundown. And he's not your prototypical outside receiver who just wins against the premier man corners in the league, but he's awesome operating out of the slot, making big plays after the catch, being physical. In this first game, he caught 6 passes for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns against the G-Men. In particular, loved when they sent him on crossing routes and then changed things up later by him starting that way and then pivoting out to the outside. Had that one play where he was wide open in the flats and went for another 10 yards after the catch. I think both he and Johnson will have big seasons. And that takes us to a final game of the week. The Tennessee Titans traveling to Denver to take on the Broncos. And for Denver, the offense might have not been spectacular or anything like that, but I already thought Drew Lock showed signs in his first game in year 2, after he had only started like 5 games at the end of last season. The Broncos only scored 14 points, and the numbers didn't look great, but I had Lock as a breakout candidate in the midst of this offseason because of all the weapons that Denver had added around him, and I liked the fact that new offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, I thought he and Lock were a very good fit together, and I like what I saw from him in that first game, putting the young signal caller on the move of bootlegs, creating an easy dump off to guys like Noah Fant in the flats, who could quickly burn the defense after the catch. I thought Lock also did a nice job buying time within the pocket without taking a single sack, and what I really liked was the willingness to take those deep shots, even though he didn't quite connect yet on those. But he was without his top receiver in Colton Sutton and second round pick KJ Hamler to stretch the field. He did make a couple of ill-advised throws across his body. One actually ended up in that Fant touchdown, while the other one should have been intercepted in the second half. But overall, I like where he's heading towards, and I like his fit with the Shurmur offense. Even though I have to say, this Denver defense, they were actually the unit that really impressed me. They received some devastating news last week when Von Miller suffered a potential season-ending ankle injury in practice. That could have really put a damper on him, but those guys came out to play. Third-year linebacker Alexander Johnson, he was pretty much unblockable all night long, especially in the zone run game, where those Tennessee linemen could not climb up to the second level before he could shoot the gap and get involved in the backfield. Also shut down a quarterback sneak on 3rd and short, got through and touched on a blitz to force an incompletion on the final drive of the game. Those last 2 plays in the 4th quarter coming through for his team. That entire front for Denver, they are playing downhill the whole time. Jarrell Casey, former Titan, did not quite get his revenge, but he did bat down a couple of passes. Tennessee could move the ball pretty well between the 20s, but through 3 quarters, they had forced Derrick Henry to stop his feet and bounce out wide constantly in the run game, where he came downhill and you actually thought Josie Jewell put Henry on his back, which is a very uncommon sight. And the Titans, despite their kicking woes, only 7 points through 3 quarters. Rookie corner Michael Ojemudia, who I highlighted as a sleeper coming into the draft, I thought he had a pretty nice debut, should have had his first career interception, which was wiped out by a teammate. But in the end, the Titans were just healthier and a little bit of a better team. I did think the Broncos defense was highly impressive, and Locke didn't have a bad game in this one. But the Titans front, they could really be a problem down the road. They didn't get a sack, but Harold Landry, he got after the young signal caller all game long, directly forced a couple of crucial incompletions, once near the goal line to a wide open tight end, and then another one on 4th and 3 close to midfield with about 5 minutes left in the game. Newly signed Jadeveon Clowney, he was relatively quiet in his debut, but he already saw that ability to crash off the edge and not allow the run game function whatsoever coming his way. But to me, the guy that I'm most pumped about to follow is Jeffrey Simmons. Had him as another one of my breakout candidates coming into 2020 because he was a dominant force in college, only fell in the draft due to a torn ACL, but would have easily been a top 10 prospect for me otherwise. He could be an absolute monster in the middle of that defense, and he already flashed some of that against Denver, where he knocked back his blockers in the run game on a few occasions and also recovered a fumble. If these guys continue to come together, I'm not totally sold on the back end yet, but Kevin Byard, one of the best safeties in the game, and that front, they could really get after people. And that finally brings us to a conclusion of this Week 1 review. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, just share it with one friend today, that would already help out a lot. You can check out more of my breakdowns here on this YouTube channel or on my page helloswithfootballtalk.com. I'm going to be back next week. Not totally sure if I'll make this a weekly thing. Let me know in the comments if you'd rather have that or a preview of the upcoming games. It's definitely a lot of work to watch every single game, but I had a blast for the NFL to finally be back. And as the season progresses, I will come up with more stuff. So until then, see you later. Peace.